Okay, so let's dive in. I mean, just look around you, right?
Yeah.
The buildings, the roads, even, the place you call home.
Yeah, they're not just static things sitting there. They're packed with history and ideas.
Exactly. Ingenuity, how needs change over time. They're constantly evolving structures.
And that's really what we're digging into today, isn't it? This whole dynamic world of building and engineering.
Yep. We pulled together a whole stack of material. It takes us from, well, some huge historical challenges.
Like building tunnels way back when, all the way to some pretty wild predictions about, future homes.
And crucially, how all that stuff informs the places we actually live in right now.
Right. The mission here is to explore how these big shifts, historical moments, leaps in technology, changing needs in society, how they've reshaped, well, everything around us.
Think of it as trying to understand the why. Why are the walls, the tunnels, the homes you see every day, why are they the way they are?
So where do we start?
Let's start digging. Literally, we're going back to the 19th century. Under London?
Ah, yes. Because London was growing incredibly fast then, wasn't it?
Oh, massively. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing. People pouring in from the countryside for factory work.
And the population tripled by 1825. That's staggering growth.
It puts unbelievable pressure on the city's infrastructure. Roads were apparently terrible, just awful.
And the Thames, it was vital for trade, obviously, but getting across it easily, that was a real bottleneck. Bridges weren't always the answer, location-wise.
Which is why they started thinking downwards, under the river.
Right. There was an early attempt, wasn't there? Ralph Dodd in 1798.
Yeah, but he ran straight into the big problem. Water. Just constant flooding.
Trying to dig through soft, wet ground under a huge river. It sounds almost impossible with the technology they had.
They even brought in a steam pump around 1805, one of the early ones, but it still wasn't enough.
Nope. Water kept coming in, walls would collapse, miners were dealing with hard rock sometimes, unstable ground others. It was incredibly dangerous work.
It's just terrifying, really. So this seems like the perfect moment for a breakthrough.
And it was. Enter Mark Brunel and his son, the maybe even more famous Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
And they came up with something completely new, didn't they? Born out of this necessity.
They did. The tunneling shield. It's ingenious, really.
Explain that a bit. What exactly was it?
Okay, imagine like a big, strong, movable frame at the very front of the tunnel dig. As the workers dug out the earth inside this frame, the shield itself held back the collapsing soil and the water.
Ah, so it protected them.
Exactly. It gave them a safe space right at the tunnel face, and then behind the shield, they could build the permanent brick lining of the tunnel section by section.
That sounds like it would actually work, a game changer.
It absolutely was. Revolutionary for tunneling in soft, waterlogged ground.
And this shield was used for the famous Thames Tunnel project.
That's the one. But it wasn't quick. Even with the shield, it was still a massive undertaking.
How long did it take?
Over 18 years. It finally opened in 1843.
18 years. Wow.
Yeah.
And its significance.
Well, it was the world's first underwater tunnel designed for public use. A huge engineering milestone.
That's incredible. Just getting it done was a feat.
But what's maybe even more amazing is its longevity. That same tunnel, Brunel's tunnel,
Yeah.
it eventually became part of the London Underground, the railway system.
No way. Yeah.
Yes. And it's been in continuous use pretty much since it was built, since 1843.
That is genuinely incredible. Think about that 19th century tech facing unheard of problems.
Yeah.
And they build something that's still a working part of a major city's infrastructure today.
It really shows how, a pressing need in a city that's just booming can push engineers to invent totally new ways of doing things. It wasn't just digging, it was inventing how to dig.
Absolutely. Okay, so from digging deep underground, let's shift focus completely. Let's look at something maybe more personal. The home. And how people imagined its future.
Ah, the home of tomorrow. That's a concept that really took off, didn't it?
Yep.
Especially starting around the 1920s.
And it wasn't just articles in magazines, right? They actually built mock-ups.
Oh yeah, full-scale models. You could see them at big fairs, even in department stores. People could literally walk through these visions of the future home.
So cool. What were those early visions like? The ones from the 20s to the 40s?
A lot of it was about futuristic architectural styles, sleek lines, new shapes, but also a big focus on mass production. Prefabricated houses.
Making modern housing available for everyone.
That was the idea, and the house itself was often pitched as this wonderland of gadgets. Technology was key.
A wonderland of gadgets. I like that.
Yeah.
So how did that vision evolve as we get into the mid-century, the 1950s?
The 50s really doubled down on technology simplifying housework, making domestic chores disappear almost.
Like what specifically?
Well, some predictions were pretty out there. Sinks that could clean dishes just with a thought.
With a thought, okay.
Or houses cleaned entirely by a central brain.
A house cleaning brain. I think people would still sign up for that one.
Probably. The big push was for a super clean, hygienic home, all enabled by tech. And, some of it started to happen. Dishwashers, washing machines, they began appearing and actually changing how people lived.
So grounded in some reality, but also reaching for the stars.
Definitely. Alongside the practical stuff, you had predictions for things like self-propelled carpets.
Self-propelled carpets. To do what? Just clean themselves.
Or maybe just move out of the way. Who knows?
What?
And lots of talk about additional push-button marvels to reduce work to almost nothing.
It sounds like they just wanted to automate everything.
Pretty much. And materials were part of it too. Ideas about homes made entirely of synthetic materials or waterproof plastic. Popular Mechanics was full of this stuff.
It's easy to kind of laugh at self-propelled carpets, but it shows this deep desire to, I guess, escape drudgery, right? It reflects what life was like then.
Absolutely. So these visions weren't just about cool tech. They were tied to the social context.
Okay, so what happens next? How did things shift in the 60s and 70s?
The 60s saw a shift towards flexibility and adaptability in design. Less focus on fixed gadgets, more on things like open planning.
Open plan living, right.
Yeah.
We still talk about that.
Exactly. And lightweight modular partitions you could move around. Minimal built-in furniture. The whole house was conceptualized almost as an electrical cord, something you could plug into and adapt easily.
Interesting. Less a fixed machine, more a flexible platform.
Sort of, yeah. Then the 70s brought a bit more pragmatism, maybe. The utopian visions started to fade a little.
Why was that?
Well, you had the rise of the green movement, growing awareness of environmental issues, and the oil crises. So energy efficiency started becoming a much bigger factor in future home predictions.
Okay. Reality bites. So efficiency over pure gadgetry.
To some extent. Then the 80s come along, and you get another wave of tech focus, but maybe slightly different. Personal computers are starting to arrive.
Right. The computer age dawns.
And you see predictions for self-adjusting living environments. Things like baths with sensors to control water temperature automatically. Computerized kitchens.
Makes sense. Integrated entertainment systems.
Oh yeah, video entertainment centers were a big prediction. And reflecting the times, home discotheques.
Home discotheques. That is so perfectly 80s. It really shows how these visions are mirrors of their era's tech and culture.
Totally. And social changes mattered too, like more women working outside the home, influencing designs, potentially aimed at convenience.
Were there other sort of quirky 80s ideas?
Well, there was the walking desk, a desk with exercise equipment, like a treadmill, built underneath it.
Okay, the walking desk.
Right.
Maybe that one was just ahead of its time.
Maybe, but yeah, it shows this constant churn of ideas. And it's interesting how, despite all the talk of plastic homes, the actual materials that continue to dominate were the traditional ones.
Yeah.
Brick, steel, timber, concrete. The sci-fi materials didn't really take over in the way some predicted.
That's a good point. It makes you think about all the actions involved in our built world. We've got words like condemn, demolish, devise, maintain.
Occupy, reconstruct, renovate.
Build, design, invent. It's not just static. It's this whole cycle of creating, changing, adapting, sometimes even removing things. It applies to tunnels, homes, everything.
It really is a continuous process. And thinking about that process, it's interesting to see how those historical efforts and those, let's say, imaginative future visions connect to actual homes people live in today.
Yeah, let's bring it to the present. The source material actually gives us descriptions of a few different homes. Let's look at those.
Okay. So first up, we have someone describing a single-story cottage.
What's that one like?
It's about 100 years old, apparently, built in a very traditional style using local timber and stone.
So older, traditional materials. Character, maybe.
Seems like it. The owner mentioned ornate ceilings, described it as cozy. Though maybe a bit small compared to newer places, it feels very rooted in its place and time.
Okay, a traditional cottage. What's another example? Something different.
Definitely different. There's a description of a modern high-rise apartment.
City living.
Right in the city center. Described as ultra-modern in design, built with lots of glass, concrete, and steel.
So, very different materials and style. Any mention of tech?
Yeah, apparently it has a pretty advanced computer system controlling things like lighting, heating, security. Very integrated.
Okay, so that connects back to some of those future home ideas, maybe. The controlled environment.
A little bit, yeah. The description emphasizes functionality. Spaces designed for specific purposes. Although they did say the bedrooms felt a bit cramped.
Trade-offs, right? What was the best feature?
The balcony, apparently it had amazing extensive views over the city. So location and the view were key selling points.
Functionality, tech, view. Got it. Is there a third example, maybe something in between?
Yeah, there's one more. A pretty conventional two-story brick house described as typical for its area.
Okay, so maybe more like what a lot of people live in.
Possibly. This person highlighted the spaciousness, especially downstairs, said the living room was particularly light and airy.
Sounds pleasant.
Yeah.
Any standout feature for them?
Yes, they mentioned a curving staircase. They really liked it, felt it added character, and was sort of inviting.
Interesting. So space, light, and a touch of character with the staircase.
Exactly. So if you put those three side by side, the old stone cottage, the ultra-modern glass high-rise, the conventional brick house.
You really see the spectrum, don't you? Different materials, different design approaches.
Yeah, the cottage is all about tradition, local materials, maybe coziness. The high-rise is about modern materials, density, technology, function, the view. The brick house is maybe about familiar comfort, space, light.
It shows how all those things we talk about, history, technology, changing needs, even just personal taste for character versus pure function, they all play out in the real world, in the places people actually live.
Absolutely. The past is still present in some homes, the future visions are partly realized in others, and some enduring designs just endure because they work for people.
It really makes you think about your own home, doesn't it? You know, what's it made of? What was the thinking behind its design? Is it more about character or function or mix?
How does it fit into this bigger picture? It makes you look at familiar surroundings a bit differently, I think.
Definitely. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we?
We certainly have.
We started way back, digging under the Thames in the 19th century, this incredible feat of engineering driven purely by need.
Then we jumped into the 20th century and explored all those, sometimes fantastical, sometimes quite insightful, predictions for the home of tomorrow.
Seeing how those ideas changed decade by decade, reflecting the times.
And then we brought it back to today, looking at how these different strands, history, innovation, tradition, modern needs, show up in the actual houses and apartments around us.
I think the main takeaway, for me at least, is just how dynamic building and engineering really are. They're not static disciplines.
Not at all. They're constantly responding to us, our needs, our dreams, our societies, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible with technology.
So thinking about how quickly those home of tomorrow ideas shifted, and how some predictions came true while others seem, well, quaint now, like the self-propelled carpets.
Or the home discotheque.
Or the home discotheque.
Yeah.
It leaves you with a final thought, maybe. Looking around now at current trends, things like AI and smart homes, or maybe advanced 3D printing for construction.
Yeah, or new sustainable materials.
Right. What aspects of today's cutting edge or today's predictions do you think will seem totally normal, just everyday stuff to people in the future? And which bits might become, the next self-propelled carpet, the fascinating idea that just didn't quite pan out for most people?
That's a great question to ponder. What will stick and what will seem like a weird dead end from the early 21st century?